Good afternoon, I guess, right? We're afternoon, right? Good afternoon. Just wanted to stop in really quick. Knew what kind of maybe had you guys here captive. And let you know we're going to continue to look into the issue that we just discussed in the full oversight committee. Based on the facts that we have, based on the information that we can provide to all of you, there's definitely, at minimum, been a clear ethics violation by Attorney General Dana Nessel. In fact, twice on two cases that specifically involve individuals that she has a close personal relationship with. One being an individual that actually worked on her transition team, also a former treasurer of the Democratic Party of Michigan, as well as Dana Nessel's spouse. The facts are lying there for anyone to observe, anyone to read, anyone to look at. The question is to what level that information relevant to, frankly, what you guys do. You guys regularly pick up news stories, look at news stories, do your own investigations, which I applaud you for doing. I'm not in no way saying otherwise. But we have information here that is clear and blatant, that two firewalls put in place for very specific reasons, very clear reasons, were violated by Attorney General Dana Nessel. To me, when you carry a very heavy club as the Attorney General, when it comes to prosecuting individuals, you also have a very high requirement on you to at all times, obviously, abstain from inappropriate behavior, but secondarily, even the appearance of inappropriate behavior, I would argue. And I would argue that the Attorney General did neither in these cases. And I would argue that at least the facts at this point on face value demonstrate that the power of her office was used to influence the direction of potential criminal cases. We heard one of the representatives in the committee speak to this being a political matter. While the reality is, that's fine. You can call it a political matter. But the truth is, the evidence says otherwise. The evidence says that Dana Nessel, on multiple occasions, in multiple cases, violated her ethical expectation. I'm not a mind reader. I can't tell you what her motivation internally was, but I can say that the external motivation clearly looks like an attempt to hedge for someone that she has a relationship with. I believe all the facts are there to demonstrate that. I think the Oversight Committee has an obligation, Republican, Democrat, friend or foe, to bring this to the people of the state of Michigan and let them make the decision based on the facts. Not on some political spin, not on some gotcha, but on the facts. And the facts say that there were violations. I'll open up to any questions that you might have on the matter. Yep. Understood. Certain. Sure. The first case is an investigation into Tracy Cornack, who was a conservator for a individual, Rosaline Bird. And it appears that there may have been some fraudulent activity that occurred. And that information was provided to the Attorney General's office. Frankly, it was broken by one of your colleagues initially. That was provided to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office did not, under any reasonable expectation interview any of the pertinent individuals with regard to the case. The only individual they spoke to was Tracy Kornack, the potential individual that committed the crime, then only to close the case, by the way, after the Attorney General violated the firewall. The second one is the Bipartisan Solutions Fair and Equal Michigan issue, which the Attorney General's office opened an investigation into, which, by the way, under the Michigan Campaign Finance Act, they do not have the authority to do. The Secretary of State's office possesses that authority, but they did open an investigation. And if you read the closing document that the Michigan Attorney General's office used to close that case, it reads like a defense attorney's position. They make an argument that the case should not proceed because of the address that the Secretary of State's office used to make communications. The irony of that is that the Attorney General's office is demonstrating with those words that there's an additional law now that has been broken, which is that Fair and Equal Michigan Bipartisan Solutions did not follow their campaign finance required rules and amend their address. I find it hard to figure out how a prosecutor's office would provide that as a defense to an individual who's already been referred as a potential violator of the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. So those are the two cases. Yeah. Yep. Anybody else? Well, I think we're going to continue to look into this. We just issued 2 subpoenas for more documents, unredacted documents. Specifically, there's a couple of there's a couple of redacted documents in the data that was provided to us that are single full sentences issued by Attorney General Nessel. I would like to know what those sentences say, because I believe that there's probably only one reason that those may have been redacted. And I think that our job is to scrutinize that. So provide us what those sentences say in clarity, and maybe there's nothing to see here. I would argue otherwise based on the rest of the facts. Yes, sir. Yes, there was a motion by a member. Yep. Yeah, essentially, structurally, how that works is there was a motion made to recommend to the full House of Representatives that Attorney General Dana Nessel be held. Yeah, sure. I would say that there's a strong possibility, but I would say that as we work through these additional documents that we're asking for, we'll see how the response goes. I would say that it would be a disservice to my position to say that that's not on the table. You have to remember that the actions of the Oversight Committee must be rooted in activities that are germane to the legislative process. And frankly, there's only one place that possesses impeachment to start, right? And that's the House of Representatives. So I would say that it certainly could be on the table for certain. We're not going to rule such a thing out. We don't know what we don't know yet, though. And we'll see what we know when these additional documents are brought forward. I would say that I will continue to review as these documents come to us. I think that's fair. Yep. Sure. I would say there's not a summary at this time. I think that might be a reasonable thing for us to do, though, as the Oversight Committee, is perhaps put together what you just said, a summary, footnote it maybe with the documents, right, to show what our basis for our position is and our opinion. You have to remember that the individuals that presented to us were just presenting the facts based on what those documents were, right? The Oversight Committee individuals are the ones that are going to have to look at those pieces of information and make a decision for themselves on what we see going on there. I think that's fair. Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah, if you go back and you look at the testimony, what occurred, and by the way, we also have the emails and the documents to corroborate this. We had issued a subpoena for her appearance. And circumstances totally beyond our control in the Oversight Committee, the date in which she was to appear passed because of nothing that we had any control of. We couldn't hold committee. We then followed up with communications asking her to be present and to provide the additional documents. The additional documents did come in eventually. It wasn't until that occurred that an email came to my office asking that she's not going to come, Dana Nessel, unless we tell her what we're going to ask her. Well, as you know, that isn't how it works, right? That's a ruse when you do that, right? So we said that is not going to happen, to which they followed up with an email that said, well, if it's on the topics of Tracy Cornack matter, bipartisan solutions for an equal Michigan, she's not going to come and testify because she has nothing to add to that discussion because she had nothing to do with those cases and had no involvement. Now, I would argue, put a hard pause right there. That is an untrue statement. And that can be demonstrated by the evidence we presented today in committee. Her emails, her own discussions, her own phone conversations. You know, the average person doesn't really understand to a depth what that ethical standard is because most of us are not attorneys. But the violation of that ethical standard compromises the entire faith of that judicial structure. And the chief and law enforcement officer, Dana Nessel, who should be holding that standard as high as anyone, violated it multiple times in multiple cases. Sure. What should just your average Michigander hear about what? Boy, there's a lot that could be said right there. I would say this. I would say look at your elected officials. Step away from your partisan biases. Look at their behaviors. Look at what they do, not just what they say. This is a clear behavior. Multiple times, multiple cases, that the most powerful law enforcement officer in the state of Michigan has stepped around a firewall, whether intentional or not, to benefit individuals that they have a close personal relationship with. That's a problem, and I don't care what your politics are. I would hope so. We issued another subpoena today. I would hope that we have communication with them. I would hope that they turn over the redacted in an unredacted fashion to us. You know, if there's nothing to see here, provide us those documents. I would argue based on the documents we have, even the ones that have redaction on it, are pretty damning on the behavior of the Attorney General. Anybody else? Well, that's it. Appreciate you guys hearing from me a few minutes. I'm available if you need further discussion. Thank you.
Wow, CBS News Detroit. That's a good one. All right. Wow. Where are they at? Who's CBS News Detroit? Oh, welcome. Great to have you here. It's a good station. Yeah, and this is a really good group today. So, yeah, do you guys like the warm-up act? You know, we had the warm-up act, Jay DeBoyer. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Just looking at who's all here. Wow. Thanks for being here, Rep. Shriver. He's a great guy. He's doing good work for the taxpayers of Michigan, and he really had our back the whole way on the budget. And we passed a great budget. We cut $800 million of waste, fraud, and abuse, including 2,000 ghost employees. And I'd stand up here and people would laugh about the ghost employees, but we cut them, saved the taxpayers $200 million, and the governor signed the bill. How do you cut 2,000 state workers and not lay off one person? The ghost employees. And all the wasteful grants we cut and all the waste, fraud, and abuse, $800 million. And we got Governor Whitmer to sign that bill. Now, I'm just so proud of our House Appropriations Committee going in there and slashing another $644 million, much of which is waste, fraud, and abuse in this recent budget. I think they've done an excellent job. I just want to highlight some of those cuts. I mean, you see the $1.3 million in welfare for illegal aliens through the Office of Global Michigan is gone. The $1.4 million for the radical left DEI nonprofit, but there were a lot of them in there. All kinds of DEI projects are now dead. Diversity, equity, inclusion is dead in the state government. The tampons in the boys' bathrooms, they couldn't find a way to spend the rest of the $1.2 million to put tampons in the boys' and girls' bathrooms. That's cut. You know, sometimes you kind of understand why the money wasn't spent. I mean, that's a lot of tampons, $1.2 million. So, you know, as we get the records, maybe they spent some on putting it in the boys' bathrooms, but not, I mean, $1.2 million is a lot to try to work project that for 4 or 5 years. I'm not sure they would have even gotten them in all the boys' bathrooms, to be honest. That's a lot. So we slashed it. We don't, you know, the people of Michigan don't want these tampons in the boys' bathrooms. They don't want that all over the state government buildings. We killed their diversity festivals, their green energy scams. I mean, you look at this, all this money they were using to match a lot of the Biden-era climate programs is gone. You look, I mean, putting the EV chargers all along Lake Michigan, all over, that's gone. All their money for the Climate Investment Fund and a lot of these other scams. We look at all of this. It's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. You know, we saw their firearm tattletale line where they want to get you to tattle on your neighbors what firearms they have in their homes. That's killed. That's done. You know, and they had a lot of scams like this National Association of Yemeni American scam where these guys, they didn't file tax returns for 5 years and they're passing out all kinds of money. They're getting all kinds of money from the state and they're not filing their tax returns. And a lot of people think this is a criminal situation and it could be being investigated. So we'll see. I mean, you see, we slashed all of Jocelyn Benson's efforts to purchase foreign election equipment and line it up with Soros-backed technologies. That's all dead. All of her IT programs that she was trying to get excess money for, that's gone. You saw that the legislature had to come in and pass in the budget a law to stop her from spending money on IT and to put it into the DTMB. And that is enforceable budget language signed by the governor. But yet they want all these work projects for more efforts for her to bungle IT. That's going to force a real conversation where we're going to be able to get the IT under the control of DTMB as the law requires. I mean, we slashed all of those projects in the DNR. I mean, you see how the DNR is out of control, not doing a very good job. They're going on people's lands and investigating them. They're doing, you know, all kinds of things to bully the hog farmers and all this. They're not following through on the budget agreement with Chairman Ken Borton. So we slashed all of their work project money, and now we'll have a negotiation, and they'll have to answer to Chairman Ken Borton and the DNR. We're going to get them more in line so that they're doing a better job of managing our forests, managing our hunting, managing our fishing in Michigan. So I'm looking forward to that conversation between Ken Borton. So as I look at this, there's really kind of two pots here. There's the departments, right? And we've talked about how there's about a $10 billion slush fund that Whitmer's created of extra money at the end of the year that they don't spend. And you pile that up year after year after year, and now it's about $10 billion that Whitmer has squirreled away. She made a request for another $2.7 billion. We approved about $2.1 billion of that, but $644 million we disapproved. Now, I find it kind of interesting. We're, 75 days into the new fiscal year, and the Whitmer administration cannot really produce for us what a lot of these programs are, how much of the money has been spent, what's out the door, what isn't, who the beneficiaries are. You see that still going on today where the Senate Democrats can't get a lot of those answers. The governor has not been able to provide a lot of those answers to us or to the media. And I think that is a symptom of the pork spending is out of control, right? I mean, remember, we had a $9 billion state surplus, and they wasted it on pork and corporate welfare and all kinds of things. And now you're seeing the symptoms of that with this $10 billion slush fund and all the hundreds of millions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse. You see projects that they snuck into budget in the middle of the night that nobody knew what they were, fake nonprofits, all kinds of things. And one of the biggest scams that we're seeing is what these groups do is they ask for more money than they need. They have no plan to spend the money. And how would you know? These were secret projects that were passed in the middle of the night in many cases. So they ask for more money than they need. We're seeing, and I'll tell you the real reason the lobbyists are so mad, we're seeing that in a lot of these pork spending projects, they're taking that money and they're paying lobbyists win bonuses. They pay the lobbyists win bonuses, and then they hide them under things like association management. Well, whether they're getting paid win bonuses for getting the pork or association management, why are so many lobbyists getting state dollars from these pork spending projects? I mean, it's out of control. I saw, Sarah Anthony talking tough last week. We heard from you guys all these rumors that the Senate was going to come in and retaliate. They couldn't retaliate. These guys were at conferences all over the country, something that Craig would only talk about if I was there. But these guys, they're at conferences, and some of them were outside the country at conferences. Nobody talks about that. They couldn't even get the people here to block spending from the Senate to retaliate because they're at conferences. And that deadline was Sunday, right? We get the report, and then 30 days we have to respond to the report. So what we do is we ask questions. We went to the departments, we asked questions. We went and tried to find out as much as we could about the spending. And I will tell you, the original plan that I had was more aggressive than this plan. And we took that feedback from the departments, but they didn't give it to us in most cases until the day of. So we're looking through these reports the day of, and the departments are really sharing with us what their most important priorities are. And in some cases, we kept those priorities from being cut because the department gave us the justifications, they explained it to us. I was never trying to disrupt really critical things that would create cataclysmic problems. And so we took their recommendations and we made adjustments. You saw us fund SOAR. You saw us fund the Business Attraction Fund. There were certain IT projects that did not get cut. because we understood them. Now, we did cut many IT projects. You look at things that we cut in DTMB, in the Gaming Control Board, in the lottery, where we didn't see a justification for that. And that's the second group, right? You have the pork spending, the secret pork spending they shove in the budget, and then you have the departments not spending all the money at the end of the year and trying to squirrel it away for 4 or 5 years. Now, I thought Thomas Albert did a good job today in their committee hearing. Someone explained it to me, and he pointed out, in many cases, these work projects are negotiated at the time of the budget. So, for example, the budget we just did, there were work projects in there where we talked about it up front. It was explained to us this is a 3-year program. And when we did the 26 budget, we approved then, if this is a 3-year program, then you have the work project authority for those 3 years. What we saw during the Democrat trifecta is they didn't do a lot of that, but that's not a surprise. I mean, Joe Tate didn't present the bills. He didn't negotiate a very good deal in the budget. And so what you see is the way the budget was written, these were 1-year projects that they intended, I guess, to ask for more money than they could spend in 1 year and then to spend it over multiple years. Now, I'll say, I think we need to reform the pork spending process. Fortunately, we've done that with HEAT, the Hall Ethics, Accountability, and Transparency Plan. All of these projects now, because we blocked the spending, we disapproved it, are now going to go through that process. My understanding is that in this committee today, we're hearing more about these projects than anyone did before they got the money in the budget, and certainly more than we got from the departments when we had to make the decision to pull the ripcord. I look at it as we have an obligation to be good stewards of the tax dollars of the people of Michigan. And when we can't account for what all this spending is, where it's going, who the beneficiary is, how much of it has been spent, we have an obligation to put a pause on this, to force a conversation on our timeline next year. And I guarantee you these organizations are now going to be coming forward and they're going to be answering our questions, and so are the departments. And I think it's important because we're finding there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in there. Now, I've said over and over, when we see good programs that are justified, we'll put those back in a deal. But, you're faced with these questions like, I was thinking about this today, like you look at this Yemeni one. They don't file their tax returns for 5 years. Some people think they're being investigated. Like if there's one criminal earmark stuck in with, say, 1,000 that are not criminal, should we approve it? And that's an interesting question to wrestle with, right? Because you could put the other 999 back in, but you can't cherry pick them. They're all in one line. And so I would say, because we have to be good stewards of the taxpayer, because the spending is out of control, the pork spending, and you guys write stories about this, they never had pork like this. They never had slush funds like this. This thing is on autopilot, and it's out of control. And I hate to say it, but the COVID spending is over. Those years of, all kinds of unlimited money are over. As we're looking ahead at this next fiscal year, and I'm talking to the House Fiscal and I'm talking to the administration, I believe we're going to see shortfalls in a lot of our critical areas. And we're going to be faced with tough decisions next year about cuts. And over here, we have $600 and some million of mostly optional programs, optional ideas that were not spent after the whole fiscal year. I'll give you an example. There's a public report that I just looked at from DHHS that points out there's a $5 million shortfall in our TANF funding this year. Which means some of those critical services that TANF provides, whether it's the cash assistance or child protective services, a lot of those things, we're going to have to find money from other places in the budget to cut that shortfall. Now, you have RX Kids. RX Kids, which is a program to get, a brand new program to give cash welfare to people that are having babies in select cities. That program didn't spend $18 million of the $20 million they were given this year. And under the current fiscal year we're under, they have another $270 million. So you look at it, say, okay, we're going to cut this. We're going to make sure we fully fund TANF programs that have been around for years, like Child Protective Services, like the other cash assistance. We've got to find that $5 million for the shortfall. We'll bring in these groups. We'll justify it. But, this isn't a trade-off between keeping the money and RX Kids, right? This is a trade-off between the traditional established programs in TANF versus a brand new program that, quite frankly, is way overfunded. I think you'll see at the end of those 3 years of the RX Kids, they don't spend a lot of that money, I bet you. So there's a lot of trade-offs like that we're looking at. I mean, again, we're looking at core functions of government in education, public safety, universities, local governments, and we're going to have some tough decisions to make next year. And so if you see these programs, hundreds of millions of dollars that were not spent in the fiscal year, I think it's important to have a conversation to figure out what all of this is, to cut the waste, fraud, and abuse, to move forward with the valid programs, knowing that next year is not going to be a great situation when you guys see the revenue estimates that are coming out. So I'll just stop there. I'm sure there's a lot you guys want to talk about. Go ahead. Yeah, Jordan.
So you mentioned these Senate appropriations made earlier today.
Yeah.
Earlier, Senator News brought up the point that he questioned whether or not these cuts would give a quote perverse incentive to spend out dollars as fast as possible now, which could open the door for even more waste, fraud, and abuse.
Right.
I'm curious what your thought process is
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah, and I think you start to see who the Republican budget traders are, the people that shove their own pork in these budgets and are pissed off that their pork got cut. But I'll say, when you look at this, this is a great example. In the 26 budget, when we did that deal, I sat in the room with the governor and Winnie Brinks, and I made that deal. We agreed to allow work projects to go a certain number of years. So I'd say like Public Safety Trust Fund would be an example. We put Public Safety Trust Fund in there, and because the Democrats always block Public Safety Trust Fund, which is making investments in local governments in public safety to lower gun violence and violent crime rates in cities, Democrats blocked that, trying to force anti-police legislation. That's why Joe Tate never got it done. I got it done because we put it in the budget as a 3-year program, and in those cases you negotiate. This is a 3-year program, so it won't go through this process. It'll be work projected for 3 years. So what you should do is you should negotiate up front for the multi-year programs like what we did in the 26 budget. And then it should be the exception to the rule if something bleeds over. And if something bleeds over the fiscal year, then the Whitmer administration should be willing to tell us why. They should say, you know what, this is the reason why. The contract didn't get executed until this year. Then we would approve it, okay? And we got examples of that because, remember, there's $2.1 billion we did approve out of the $2.7. But when they won't provide answers, and the law requires us to approve or disapprove in 30 days, where we don't have answers, we disapprove, and then we force a conversation to get the answers because we have to be good stewards of taxpayer money. That's why we did it. Now, when I look at this stuff, now it's the rule. Everything just gets automatically squirreled away year after year after year, and it's all on autopilot, and it shouldn't be, and when they come to raise your taxes very soon, I mean, there's a ballot proposal to raise your taxes, some people. When they come to raise your taxes and you say, oh, but they have a $10 billion slush fund, because we put it on autopilot. There's a lot of legitimate, good government functions that we need to cover in the future that this dollars, I think, would be better used for than some of these wasteful pork spending programs like the tampons in the boys' bathrooms and fake organizations that don't file their tax returns and all kinds of things. Yeah, go ahead, Elena. Yeah. Yeah, so it's slush funds, right? I mean, there's a $10 billion pot sitting there in government of their slush fund. And some of that is not allocated to any program. So I think in our last estimate, it was when this used to be, this is how crazy this is. So when I came up here when we were doing the budget, it was only $6 billion. Now somehow it's $10 billion. I don't even know why. Maybe somebody back here can tell me. It used to be $6 billion. Then somehow they gained $4 billion since we started working on last year's budget. So they have $10 billion. Now, when it was $6 billion, there was $2.5 million of that was not allocated to anything. $2.5 billion, not allocated to anything. So when we were explaining at the time the $5 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse, $2.5 billion of that was the unallocated work project slush fund. And it's all, I mean, so, right, we appropriate that money for a year. They don't spend the money in the year. Sometimes they appropriate it to nothing, apparently, but in some cases they dedicate it to a specific purpose. But they get to hold on to it indefinitely for years and years and years with no legislative oversight. And so what we're doing here, we're denying it, and now we're forcing a negotiation. So if the DNR wants their money back, they're going to have to be more accountable to the people, to the hunters and fishers of Michigan. And there's a lot of departments like that. I mean, we saw hundreds of millions of dollars of wasteful IT projects. At the end of the year, they didn't spend all the money. We slashed some of them to have a conversation and say, look, if you want your money back for these IT projects, we better narrowly tailor this and get better use for the taxpayers. Yeah, go ahead, Craig. Right. Yeah, so the way these line items work, Craig, so like I think it was, let's say, I'm doing this off the top of my head, it's like 60 billion or 60 million in work projects, one line item for infrastructure. There's another line item, it's say $102 million for community enhancement grants. Now, because those are in one line, we can't cherry pick them. We have to either cut all of them or cut none of them. And what I would say is through their secret earmark spending process, oftentimes you can't figure out who the beneficiaries are. There are hundreds of these things in these line items. And I would put that on the department, right? I mean, we couldn't even get a sheet from the department, so they're required to give one to us quarterly. They give you, like, it looks like the budget. So in the budget, it'll be like a 4-word explanation. So it'll be like the sheet we had. It was like, it'll be under some creative name, and then the dollar amount. And there might be a 1-sentence explanation, but it often won't tell you the beneficiary. And then there'll be an amount expended and an amount appropriated. And I'll just say, like, the departments don't want us to make cuts, so they won't give us updated information. So we're working off of whenever the last publicly available report was. And we're telling them for weeks, we're going to make cuts here, share this information with us, we're going to be doing it. Now, I'll tell you, this is one of the tools that departments use to block cuts. They try to slow walk the information to prevent you from making the cuts. The day of, they started to realize we were serious, and the information flow we were getting from the departments was largely their big priorities, not the pork spending. And so what we did is we took the information we had and we protected things that we saw very clear, defined uses for. But to what you're talking about, I think that's a symptom of the fact that the pork spending is out of control. I think with heat, you would have been able to understand. There'd be a public document you could look at and say, this is what it is, this is the beneficiary, this is the purpose. You know, in the time frame we had, we were not really volunteered a lot of that information from the department. I don't think that our caucus has a responsibility to reach out to these groups. I think we have a responsibility to get the information. I think the department has a responsibility to get us the information about the programs. And I think the fact that the department still, right now, the Whitmer administration, can't really give any of us answers is a problem. Now, you know, you guys reported recently about how MEDC was struggling with the implementation of these programs. They were, you know, this was before this. You guys reported, you know, they're struggling to approve things. They don't know, they're getting these invoices. It's just a total mess over there. And I would say they're overwhelmed because this is a huge explosion of secret pork spending that they're taking on. Now, in the 26 budget, we cut pork spending by 87%. I think we should keep cutting the pork spending. And I would say, you know, some of these things, like I saw the thing on the wigs, okay? I think we have to ask ourselves, a lot of these groups are coming to us not for one-off projects. You know, I understand, like, you know, there's a new community center and they want us to fund their community center. What was going on, though, you know, to build it, one-time infrastructure. What was going on during the Democrat trifecta is they were funding operational costs for these organizations year after year after year. Somebody showed me a slide from the Democrat committee meeting today, and what some of these organizations are saying is the state is our primary funding source. The state, so now our operational costs every year are dependent on the state. So these things are transferring from nonprofits and charities to kind of expansions of the state government. Then you're asking yourself, are these the appropriate roles of the state government? If they are, why are we doing it through sole source contracts? If it's the role of the government to provide wigs to kids, then why don't we competitively bid it and allow bids? Why are we sole sourcing it to one organization that's dependent on us? By the way, that got another $125,000 for this current year in the budget. So they didn't spend their $50,000 or whatever, part of it last year, but they have another $125,000 this year, so they'll be fine. And you see that with a lot of them. I looked at one, the LAHC. My numbers might be wrong, but slightly wrong. They're pretty much right, but I may be off a little. So they got money in 24. You look into this. They got money in 24. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2024 they didn't spend. It's work projected. Then in 25, they had $2 million, most of which they didn't spend. We rejected. Then in 26, they got another $3.5 million for this current fiscal year. So we're looking at that. That's one that was broken out. It wasn't in a big schedule. And we're just saying they got money in 24, they haven't spent. It's work projected. They got $3.5 million in 26, which is probably more than they asked for. And there's $2 million in 25 that they didn't. So we look at it and say what they're doing is they're asking for more money than they need. Because, you know, what they're doing, what the lobbyists advise them to do, and I've heard from some of the lobbyists what they're doing, they need $1 million. So they ask for $3 million, you know, because they may not, you know, because they figure, well, maybe we'll get the $1 million. Then the Democrat trifecta actually gave them the $3 million, and they don't know what to do with it. And so they don't spend it at the end of the fiscal year. That's what's happening. And so in those cases, let's take the money back and let's spend it on essential needs of government, education, public safety, our social safety net, roads, all those things. And then where they still need the money, we'll put it back in. We can do that very easily. Yeah, go ahead. Well, I don't think that it's our job to reach out to every single. I think the department has an obligation to give us the information. But they have an obligation. They're asking for our permission to extend this funding, which is not supposed to be the rule. It's supposed to be an exception. These are things that were not pre-negotiated as more than 1 year, like what we did in the 26 budget. Well, if the departments are exceeding their authority under the law, that's another reform that needs to be made, right? The administration may be entering into contracts they do not have the authority to do because they were not granted that approval at the time the budget was signed. So I think we've stumbled on a process that's out of control, it's wasteful, and really needs to be reformed. And my hope is that through this, we're going to make those important reforms so we get better value out of your tax dollars. At the end of the day, this is hundreds of millions of dollars of your taxes. And I'd say, you know, I'd ask some of the groups like to continue this pork spending spree. You know, would you endorse us raising the corporate income tax if we put that and dedicate it just to continuing legislative pork? Or do you want us to get better value for your dollars, get it under control, and ensure we're providing the basic needs of government, and then where we have money funding things, but only what they actually need, not millions of dollars more. And we shouldn't be funding bonus wins for lobbyists or their association fees for association management. Why is it the job of the taxpayers to manage an association that's trying to get pork? That makes no sense. Go ahead, Travers.
What are your thoughts on the legislation put through by Santa and about having data center tax incentives? And is it concerning to you at all that Johnson Benson might be benefiting from some of these data centers with their owners involvement?
Oh, those are some really interesting questions. So, if what the all right, I want to understand this. So I'll just say like there's $100 million in the budget for in SOAR, I believe, for the University of Michigan for their Los Alamos data center. We could have cut that through the work project process, but after feedback from the administration and from our members, we declined to do that. That would have been grouped in with Dow and Detroit Diesel. We declined to cut that because, we got a pretty good understanding of what that was. It was under, contract, and that was a big priority of the administration and also our members. Some of our members didn't think that was the right thing to do. So I would say if we were going to cut that, we would have cut it in this work project process. I don't think we're not going to go and try to pass legislation to cut it. We could have done that. We chose not to. Now, I saw somebody introduced a bill on repealing the sales and use tax for data centers. I'm open to that. I voted against it. And I'm open to repealing that. I mean, I heard somebody ask the question, why are there so many data centers all of a sudden, all at once, trying to come to rural areas of Michigan? Well, the reason is because at the end of the Democrat trifecta, the legislature approved a tax break for the data centers, incentives and a tax break, and that's why the data centers are all coming here at once. I voted against that because I didn't think data centers were the industry that we should be trying to attract. I actually think a lot of data centers would locate here without the incentive because of our access to water, because of the climate and the temperature, and we have a lot of available land. Without the incentive, it probably would have happened more, slowly. But when we gave them the sales and use tax cut, that's incentivizing it. Now they're all coming at once, and it's overwhelming people. So I would consider repealing that. I haven't made up my mind, but I would strongly consider it because, again, I think our goal as Republicans, we want to lower property taxes, we want to lower income taxes, We want to have regulatory reform. We want to make Michigan a state where people want to move their businesses to because it's a good business environment. And the problem with cutting sales tax and making sales tax exemptions is we still have important government services that we have to pay for. And you can't cut sales tax, income tax, and property tax. So I think sales tax is actually a more fair tax. So we should keep sales tax. And we should be working to cut income tax and property tax. That's why. And then your third, I think I have major concerns about whether we can trust Jocelyn Benson. And I don't think we can trust Jocelyn Benson through her, if she were governor, to ensure that the ratepayers of Michigan are not paying for these data centers. And that's another one of my concerns. We put it in the law, but you have to trust the administration and the Public Service Commission to enforce that. And with the new governor, and it could be Jocelyn Benson, I don't trust that at all. Yeah, go ahead, Jordan. Oh, yeah, yeah.
I know that last week it was quoted as $645 million.
Yeah.
We are starting to learn some of those figures are either been somewhat paid out or costs being spent. Do you have a final dollar amount yet, whether there's postal property with getting or expensive those come actually with?
Yeah, and I think that gets to my point, which is we have a very limited window to disapprove this out-of-control waste, fraud, and abuse, and some good projects. And we have to sort through that in a very short period of time. Well, they send it to you over Thanksgiving and hunting break, right? And you saw there were some very aggressive timelines that our department heads, like our subcommittee chairs, requested. So they said, get us answers by Thanksgiving. Well, most departments didn't do that. Most departments didn't give us feedback until the night before or the day of. And it was because I think they were trying to stonewall us. Like so many things, until they know you're going to do it, they don't engage. They block, they obstruct, right? That's how the bureaucracy stays the way it is. That's how we have an $81.5 billion budget. And remember, we got Whitmer to sign a smaller budget this year than last year. And so, but still, I mean, it's grown a lot under Whitmer, over 40% under Whitmer. And so that's one of the things is, we're 75 days approximately into the new fiscal year, and they still can't tell anybody what they're doing with these projects, how much was spent, how much was not spent, what do they have invoices for, what's under contract, what isn't. And I would say that's mismanagement of your tax dollars. If the department, 75 days after the fiscal year, the Whitmer administration has no idea what's going on with the money, that's a problem. And we're going to clean up that problem through forcing this issue and getting reform. I did want to show you this. This is a beautiful book that I was looking through today. This is the Public and Local Acts from the session of 1988, and it's one of the books on our bookshelf back here, down here where there's a whole. I just want to tell you, we looked this up. So this is my favorite Michigan law, by the way, the one we used, and I just want to tell you. So it's Act number 504, Public Act from 1988, passed 88-2 in the House. That not later than 45 days after the conclusion of the fiscal year, the director shall notify the Senate and House Appropriations Committee of Appropriations proposed to be designated as work projects in accordance with the definition contained in the Act. And it goes on. These designations may be disapproved by either Appropriations Committee within 30 days after the date of notification, and if disapproved within that time shall not be effective. Now, I've done some research. This bill was from Senator Harry Gast, and I believe the Appropriations Room, the Senate Appropriations Room, is named after him. It passed 88-2 in the House under Democrat Speaker Gary Owen, a highly respected former Democrat Speaker. They passed this 88-2. They put this in place. And my understanding of why they did this was when they passed the 1984 Act, the work projects were out of control. They were just forever. It wasn't 5 years, it was forever. And so in 1988, Harry Gass passed this law. It passed 88-2 in the House. Now, Brinks wouldn't give me the Senate Journal, so you guys will have to go over there and get her Senate Journal. But, what a great foresight Harry Gass and House Speaker Gary Owen had to pass this. So I encourage you to look more at this law. It's my favorite Michigan law, and you can find it on the bookshelves of the Capitol. But go ahead, Elena. Oh, yeah, no, yeah. Right. Yes, I think it's 644, but right, I mean, they aren't rushing to give us the information, and I'd say I often assume it's because they're trying to obstruct us, and they're trying, the bureaucrats are trying to prevent us from cutting. Now, it may just be they literally have no idea. There's so much money everywhere going out the door, in the door. There's a backlog of all kinds of things, and so they literally have no idea what's going on with your money, and that's why we're putting a pause on it to get this under control. We're going to reform this process, and we're going to get much more responsible use of your tax dollars moving forward. Yeah. Right. Well, I think that it's one of the key reasons why I think the most significant public act of the year, HEAT, the Hall Ethics, Accountability, and Transparency Plan. Now, we're not going to have this problem anymore because they have to disclose 45 days in advance. We're going to understand what these projects are before we enter into them, who the beneficiary is, what the public benefit is, what the use is, what the completion date is. That's all part of HEAT. And so as we're reforming that moving forward, you're going to know what these projects are, and you can look at the document they put forward before it was passed. Did they say it was a 3-year project, or did they say it was a 1-year project? I think these things should be pre-negotiated in the future, just like they were in many budgets, just they didn't do it in the Democrat trifecta. And ultimately, this is pork spending from a Democrat-controlled government, House, Senate, and in many cases, they won't put their names on it. They have to find a sponsor after it's approved to get the money. No one will put their names on it. We don't know. There's not a legislator you could go to and say, hey, what is this? Nobody knows what a lot of it is. It was shoved in there in the middle of the night and right before the vote. Yeah, but a lot of time those are fake sponsors that they get after the fact. They're fake sponsors, though, in many cases. Because you go to them and you say, did you really sponsor this? And they say, no, I put my name on it after the fact because we needed somebody to to check the box. And you know that. Yeah. Were you going to ask something else? Oh. Mm-hmm. I think we know a lot of it, but in many cases, a lot of it's secret pork spending. What did you say? Again, the department is responsible for providing the list, and the spending is so out of control that they're even struggling to get a grip on it. And what you're saying to me is, should you approve spending? Approve the spending of dollars when they won't sufficiently justify what the use is? And the answer to that is no. You shouldn't approve $644 million when they won't tell you what the use is. That's an abuse of the trust that the taxpayers put into us. I mean, so if they weren't going to justify it, then we need to cut it, and we need to have a conversation. We'll put back in the things that they justify. But we're going to eliminate a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, and I talked about it. I'd love to see them come to me and explain the tampons in the boys' bathroom and their we're not going to do any of their DEI programs, and all these wacky EV chargers, and the Climate Investment Fund, and all these wacky ideas they had to partner with Biden-era climate programs. That's all dead. And a lot of the pork, too. I mean, you see it, this Yemeni one, that they file no tax returns for 5 years and get government money year after year, and no one checked. And we're just going to approve it because there's some other good projects in there. We need to get the spending under control, and I'm proud of Ann Bolin and the House Appropriations Committee for doing it. And just because other people didn't take their job seriously and didn't do the job, that's not an excuse for us to just let it go. Because I guarantee you, if there's something in there we approve because there's some other good things in it, you guys would not be very nice to me if it was a scandal on the one item. And you would say, well, why did you approve it? And you said, because there are these other good things in there. You guys would just write about the scandal that we didn't get a handle on it. So we're doing our due diligence, and I'm really proud of the Appropriations Committee. And we're reasserting that balance of power between the legislature, the House, and the governor. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Well, my guess is he's got a lot of secret projects in there. He cut deals with Democrats on, and he's unhappy they got cut. Working against his caucus, working against the voters that trusted Republicans with elections. So I would just say that, this was a deal between the Democrats. They didn't seek my input. They didn't seek our members' input. We were not a part of it. And so they shouldn't have lost the House because Joe Tate made that deal. There was not one Republican House member that voted for it. And they didn't spend the money, and they didn't do a very good job. And so we took our responsibility. The people elected a House Republican majority after looking at what a disaster that budget was. It blew through a $9 billion surplus. And we're doing what the people elected us to do, which is cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. And just like everyone laughed at me about the ghost employees until Whitmer signed it, the wasteful grant programs, the out-of-control IT spending, we cut $800 million of waste, fraud, and abuse out of that budget, and we made it smaller than last year. Whitmer signed it. Nobody's laughing about the ghost employees now. It's the same thing here. There's a lot of scams. There's a lot of fake organizations. There's a lot of money going to lobbyists. It's not good use for tax dollars. We're going to get it under control, and then we're going to fund the good programs that are good use of tax dollars, and we're going to take the rest, and we're going to fund essential core items of government. Ensuring we have the TANF money, the shortfall from last year covered, funding public safety, our social safety net, roads, education. That's our job. When we have extra money, it's nice to spend it on pork, but not this much pork. A lot of it's pork. Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're exposing a problem. Like if the Whitmer administration is not able to get a contract signed in a timely manner, or in many cases, there's probably a legitimate reason why they didn't do it. Maybe they looked into it and it was a scam, and the Whitmer administration didn't want to spend the money on a scam. And then, many cases they asked for more money than they needed. These cuts are coming eventually, whether it's now or next year when you get the revenue estimating numbers, and we're going to have to make a lot of cuts. They're going to say, wow, I wish we would have had that money before it got work projected for 5 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, number one, this process is broken and it's out of control. It's become the norm to squirrel away billions of dollars of taxpayer money with no conversation, no accountability, no explanation. We need to rein that in. This should become the exception to the rule, not the rule. We need to reform this process of creating these large government slush funds. That should be pre-negotiated in many cases so that everyone understands up front. And it doesn't go through this process that is designed for the one-year programs, but because they didn't have a deal, they didn't do it in 1 year, or now they want 5 years to do it. We need to eliminate a lot of this pork spending, get it under control, and we need to be spending money on really the core essential needs of state government, which includes roads, public safety, education, and our social safety net. And then we need to stop this process of overfunding pork spending projects and then paying out win bonuses and association management to lobbyists. Lobbyists should not be getting taxpayer money for getting pork spending. It shouldn't be happening. And I really don't see any reason why they should be paying for association management. We prop up these associations and then we fund their association management with your tax dollars. Remember, there are conversations about raising your taxes, but yet there's a $10 billion slush fund. I do want to thank, by the way, Ralph Rebrandt. He put out a very nice press release, a great guy running for governor, and he put out a press release praising us. I'm really grateful for that, and I'm really grateful for all the support we've received from so many people across the state that are saying, thank you, this is what we voted for, getting waste, fraud, and abuse under control, getting better value for your tax dollars, and reforming the government spending. So I'm really happy about that. Mm-hmm. 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 So again, we took the input from the Whitmer administration. They provided a lot of justification for why those programs were needed. And we talked to our caucus members with the information that we had, and members decided they wanted to keep that one. So again, we took input, and I gave Brinks a heads up on what we were doing 24 hours in advance. You saw the subcommittees sending notification out to the department weeks in advance. And that was one that there were a lot of arguments made that persuaded our committee. And it was a higher priority of the administration than other things. And again, I'm not trying to disrupt and do cataclysmic things. What I'm trying to do is get justification for all of the spending. And then if their justification satisfies, the committee approved it. And they spent a lot of effort justifying SOAR. This was a high priority that they explained. I mean, if you contrast that with the pork, I think you can see right now they're still struggling to tell any of us what the pork is. And a lot of that pork really was a priority of legislative Democrats. And I think, you've seen the governor make public comments about she has concerns about pork. She talked about that. She embraced my idea to do HEAT, the Hall Ethics, Accountability, and Transparency Plan at the state of the state. I'm not speaking for her because I did not talk to her directly about this, but I'm just explaining through our efforts to talk to the departments. I think they prioritized SOAR, Business Attraction Fund, many things. But I think in some cases, because of how secret the pork spending is, how much bigger it is, how we're finding all kinds of scandals in the pork spending, it's a little harder, I think, for anybody to really explain to anyone what they're doing. That's why we wanted to slow it down. We wanted to force them to come in, explain all these programs to our satisfaction, and then we'll fund the ones that really provide value for your tax dollars. And in many cases, the organizations whining the most have substantial investments from the state of Michigan for the current fiscal year that they'll tap into. And you heard the RX Kids person say that. She has $20 million in TANF money for this current fiscal year and $250 million of general fund money. She's going to get that under contract. It's going to be just fine. But they didn't spend $18 million from last year, and I think we could put that to better use to cover this TANF shortfall, to cover Child Protective Services, the other cash assistance programs. And we'll see, we'll listen to her arguments about why she needs more. But they had $20 million last year. Now they have $270 million next year. I think they're going to be fine. And they didn't spend 18. And then I'll just point out a last thing. We do have an agreement with the Senate to move a number of bills this week. I don't know what it is. Let's say it's 25 bills. So you'll see some of those hopefully move. It's my expectation that the Senate will follow through on this agreement. So assuming everything is what the Democrats have agreed to, you'll see us move out today and move some of those Senate bills. You'll see them move some of the House Republican bills. And I think we can end this year on a high note with, at least 25 negotiated bills that are covering things that really have a year-end need. Sometimes you have to do things before the end of the year. I know there's some Democrat bills in the Senate that give tax break or that renew tax breaks for farmers that expire at the end of the year. There's one that Bill Schuette has on the Consumer Price Index, and that has a deadline for the end of the year. There's some regulatory changes that are needed to be done. So you'll see that today on our agenda, and hopefully you'll see that on their agenda. We can end the year on a high note. So I think is it session right now? All right. Well, I guess I better go. We're about to start session. So hopefully I answered your questions and gave you guys something to write about. And great to have you here, Craig. My favorite reporter. And good to have you here, Craig. So, all right. We'll see you guys.